Oh, what a lovely summer. Oh, what a long, long strike. But if we have to go through it all again, we would still stand up and fight. Convoys of coke going from Orgreave, men standing side by side, women serving the soup for them, watching lorries of coke go by. Rows and rows of men in blue, horses, dogs, and truncheons too. Hitting miners, they didn't care who. How can we forget that sad, sad time? Dads, sons and brothers who were on that picket line. Men came from Durham, from Scotland and Wales too, just striking for their pits to go back to. Memory will erase many things as time goes by, but in our hearts, what happened at Orgreave that day will never die. I'm proud I married a miner. I'm proud they're friends of mine. You'll see, I know a host of them. They were on that picket line.
Sheffield and Rotherham Independent, Friday, December the 15th, 1893. The trial of the men accused of participating in the South Yorkshire colliery riots, after dragging wearily on for some days, reached its closing stages today. On his lordship taking his seat soon after 10 o'clock, Mr. Barker said the prosecution had decided to withdraw all charges against Guest, Reeve, Rimington, Perry, Parkin, Sidebottom and Crane. 4 of them were very young, and the others had good characters. The evidence of alibi seemed tolerably conclusive. The jury then returned a verdict of not guilty in regard to these men on both counts.
We haven't been defeated, we're not defeated. We've been found not guilty on a trumped-up charge. Everybody knows it was trumped up right from day one, and that's it.
These photographs here were taken of me on the day, and this is what I've been. This is the riot charge. That's the state I'm in. It shouldn't have been me that got charged with riot. It should have been him there, and him there. They should have been charged with riot, no me. That's the kind of mess that they left me in. And then they gave us a trumped-up charge of riot that could have got life imprisonment.
People that know us know that we don't do the things they said we'd done. They're the people that did the belting with the sticks and the truncheons and kicking women throughout the miners' strike and all the rest of it. This is just one aspect of the miners' strike. What they've done throughout the miners' strike in Nottinghamshire, where I live, is unbelievable. People don't want to listen to it. The BBC give you miners, pickets, violent and all that rubbish. They don't see the police charging through the street, stopping you going out your own door. And it's time somebody to show them what happened.
Members of the jury, on the 18th of June, they came from Scotland, South Wales, Derbyshire and County Durham in fleets of coaches. Their aim was force and violence. No miner on the 18th could be ignorant of this situation. He would have to have been as naive as a babe in arms. No miner could have said that he went to Orgreave not intending any violence. They did. The rule of the mob prevailed. Where was this happening? In some foreign land? In South America? It happened on a 15p bus ride from this court at Orgreave.
Of the lads that came on that day, I know they came from Scotland, Wales, they came from all over, sure. They didn't know Orgreaves from Blackpool Pier, if you like to put it that way, did they? And when they came along, they came with all good intent to put a show up, to be there in enough numbers to just literally block the road, and they could have peacefully sat down and lorries couldn't have gone in.
was standing here talking to my mate about going to see a pigeon fancy over on the allotments across the way. And at that particular moment, I seen the ranks open up and there's about 6 policemen come out with riot shields. They dropped the riot shields on the road and started to run towards me. As they got about 5 or 6 yards off me, I realised they was going to hit me. So I turned and ran. And I went down here. And as I went down, I was a thumping sound on the side of my temple. And I could feel blood running down here. And next minute, they got my arms up my back, pulling me up and kicking me in my legs and my thighs and that. Eventually, they gets me up after regaining consciousness and walks me through the police lines. Then you could see him banging on the riot shields. You know, that's all you could hear. And I thought to myself, you're not policemen. Policemen don't act like that, no way.
The prosecution arrests people, makes up statements that go along with them, dumps them in a bin and doesn't really care at all until the trial comes up and they see what they've got. Prime example of this. Prime example, David Michael Wilson. Dumped in a pot, wrong place, wrong time, doesn't matter. He's one of 55 charged with riot. Worst public order offence in the history of this country. Therefore, he's subject to all that fear, all that stress. First day of the trial, prosecution says, mistake. Wilson, wrong man, wrong place, wrong time. Don't even say sorry. Don't even say sorry to Mr. Wilson.
On 18th of June, the police actually escorted us in to Orgreave that day, which was strange because normally they'd stop us at motorways or wherever. At bottom, there's a command post, and that's where police planned all military operations on day. Straight across from there, there's main gates at coking plant, where lorries used to go in with scab lorry drivers. We were ushered into this cornfield, and that's where they made us stand, facing a thick blue line of police, probably 10 deep, with all the big riot shields and things. And they were there, obviously, to stop us getting down to speak to these lorry drivers at gate. There were dogs on right in wood. They were only there for one reason, so that we couldn't go that way. On left, there were a steep banking and there were dogs at bottom of there. Then you'd look behind you, and once again there were horses, probably seven of them, with police on, equipped in riot gear once again. So you actually felt as if you were penned in, totally. There's only one way out, and that's up to top at village where there's a bridge.
When we arrived, early in the morning, police would be there quite jovial, messing, joking with lads. But you could tell when lorries were coming because police lines backed up. They backed up with riot police, with horses, with dogs. It was set out like a military campaign.
Police tactics against pickets ain't always been where it were at Orgreave on 18th of June. I remember in '74, it was not like that at all. We were allowed to speak to people. Beginning of this strike we were. I mean, we were successful in Notts. We actually closed 90% at Notts coalfield down in the first 2 days.
20 of us went, and there's 2 gates to Cresswell pit, and we successfully picketed Cresswell out. No violence, no threats, just lads that were going into work stopped, spoke to us. We put forward our case to them, and they accepted it, turned around and went home. And Cresswell was successfully closed by 20 men. No problems at all.
That day, only one man went to work, only one man passed us after they'd listened to our reasoning. Now, after that, I mean, day after, obviously, same as Dave said, things had totally changed, but there were roadblocks.
Well, I didn't believe in the strike for a start, you know, I believed it was too soon, really, you know, they didn't give the lads enough time to prepare themselves. But when the pickets came from Yorkshire, and I stood and talked to them, and I believed what they said, And I thought to myself, there's no way that I'm ever going to cross your lads. And I never did, and I never will.
On Monday, the 18th of June 1984, the occasion of the greatest violence inflicted by the pickets, these defendants committed the offence of riot. What is a riot? A riot is where 3 or more people gather together and they have in their minds a common purpose which they intend to achieve through force, behaving in such a way as to terrorize someone of ordinary strength of character. Each of these defendants went to Orgreave that day with that common purpose in mind. They intended to achieve their aims by force, by sheer force of numbers, overwhelming numbers, by pushing, shoving, and kicking. The cordon of police was there to keep the peace.
Saturday, September the 9th, 1893. The rioting in West Yorkshire. 3 men killed and 10 injured is in brief the result of Wednesday's rioting in the home county. It remained for the authorities in the South Western Division to teach the miners a lesson which they will not soon forget. Mob law has reigned for the past fortnight, but the stringent measures which have now been adopted bid fair to nip in the bud any further outbreaks. Captain Barker ordered the front rank to kneel, and 4 files to fire in the midst of the mob. The report of firearms was followed by cries and groans, and 10 or a dozen were seen to drop.
The law of this country allows people to go about their lawful affairs unimpeded. That is our democratic system. If we want to change the law, we use parliamentary democracy. We do not use force. At Orgreave, there were people employed who had a job to do and wanted to do it, and they were entitled to do it. You may wish to persuade them, to speak to them, but you are not entitled to use force. Otherwise, we are therefore back to the rule of the bully boy.
We weren't involved in any confrontation with miners ourselves. We were all right to come through to work and we didn't get no hassle. Well, when convoy came in, we came to the gates and with pickets mixed it in with pickets on here. We didn't leave premises. And then when convoy went away, so did miners and so did we.
One road or the other, Scunthorpe will take the decision to close the plant. But at the same time, we wanted to give some kind of support and sympathy to the miners, which resulted in the lads coming out and making a protest that way.
Media and police will have people believe that miners were rioting and throwing masses of bricks and lumps of concrete at police. It won't like that in slightest. I was there, and only incident to me that occurred was a ritual push. It was a push between pickets and police, and it happened on every picket line. Only people that rioted that day were police. They went berserk.
If there was anybody rioting that day, certainly wasn't us. If anybody was out of hand that day, it wasn't us.
And when they send horses charging at innocent lads that's only got not even shirt sleeves, they've only got a T-shirt on or just the jeans, they hadn't come armed with knives and spears and things like that. They'd come purely to put a protest up.
Anybody who happened to be in the vicinity were fair game to police, whether you were hit by truncheons or trampled by an horse or bit by a dog, you were fair game.
It's no exaggeration to say that the sky was black with missiles, bottles, heavy machinery, ball bearings, so I sent the horses in again. They were told to advance at a walk and then a trot. I wouldn't have been worried in the slightest if people had been trampled. I could not be held responsible if miners were silly enough to stay there. ordered all the short shield units to draw their truncheons. I would imagine they were used on heads. I didn't tell them not to, but it's a general instruction not to aim at the head. It isn't aimed at people running away.
Friday, 8th of September, 1893. At the Orgreave pit of the Rothervale Colliery Company, a crowd collected early in the morning, rumours having been circulated that the company were drawing coal from the pit. The authorities took prompt action, and in a very short time, armed fusiliers were on the premises.
The people lived in these cottages adjacent to the pit, and then when soldiers came in, they came in to suppress riots. They were quickly turned out, and then they built sort of turf shelters in a nearby wood where they had to make whatever life for themselves as they could during that dispute. If they felt that they could have turned us out at our houses during our strike, they would have done, and we would have been made to live like that if they could have carried it through.
Well, I don't think they'll ever get it back to what it was in 20s and 30s, because I don't think they'd stand for it myself anymore.
In 1926, people were charged with rioting, and all they were doing were actually fighting for a livelihood to stop the coal owners from reducing the wages and giving them longer hours. Now all we're doing now is fighting for a chance to work and a chance to feed his families. The trouble is, by shutting pits wholesale, then they're actually locking a national asset underground.
Well, I think the plans are set on privatisation. In order to privatise, they have to get shut certain sectors of coal industry, what they class as uneconomic.
I don't care what anybody says, there's no such thing as an uneconomic pit. You can take Coalboard's own figures, because if they shut a pit, they've still got to pay pensions, they've still got to pay subsidence money, they've still got to pay interest on loans to government. They've still got to pay redundancy. That's if they want us all on dole. And then they've got to pay us dole money. And don't forget, it's not just miners then. You're talking about a knock-on situation. Because for every 100 miners that lose a job, there's 87 other people in other industries who lose their jobs. It's not but a big con. Because it don't save money to shut pits. It costs money. It cannot be brought down to economics. You've got to look at the other side of it. We're talking about people. They've all got a right to live, and a right to live decently. It's the social aspect totally that this government just ignores.
They're caught, and they have to do something about it. The thing they have to do is to break up industries, they have to shrink them, they have to break up working class organisations in order to break the working class. The things that are different this time is that working class haven't been defeated. And unlike 1926, it's not a defeated working class. It's an undefeated working class. It's a strong working class, and that's their major problem. They can't break it.
This strike didn't just happen, it was planned as far back as 1978, when Tories commissioned a Tory MP, Nicholas Ridley, to make the Ridley Report. It's never been publicised, and it was the Tories' secret charter for privatisation. In Ridley Report it stated that the coal stocks must be built up, police riot units must be trained, scab lorry drivers must be recruited, or non-trade union lorry drivers, whichever you want to say. And this come about in 78.
I have to go back further than Ridley Report. Tories in early 70s never believed that they could use state against trade unions and working class. In actual fact, Callaghan's Labour government showed the way for him. He used the troops against the Fire Brigade Union to break their strike. He armed the police. He set it up with confrontation at Grunwicks, where they used horses and truncheons and all the rest of it. They learned the lessons from that, and Ridley Report came out, or were done, learning the lessons from Callaghan's Labour government. So the Labourites had actually shown the way to the Tories on the way to deal with trade unions.
We were somewhat naive. We'd sat back on our laurels from 1974 and rested back, and they prepared. They practised. They practised in Ireland, they practised in Brixton and Toxteth. And when it were our turn, they perfected the techniques, and they used them to great effect on us.
Well, I came to Orgreave because I'm a police watch observer for Sheffield Police Watch. We arrived there about 10:15, and I don't think there were more than 500 or 600 on the field as a whole from 10 o'clock onwards. Maybe there was a bit more towards 11, but nothing substantial. And as you can see, the foreground is typical of what was going on. There was a group of horses in the woods at the side there. And it looked as though the police had a plan, and that they basically executed that at 11 o'clock. They decided to clear the field. The cavalry came up the road, and then there was the advance of the foot police up behind them, each time moving a bit more up the hill as the horses came up the hill and then went back down again. One of our police watch observers is in fact there. She's in the photograph sitting on the wall.
There's a second charge now, and that has cleared the road, and the riot police in their big lines of 10 lines deep are moving up. They're now coming quite close to where we are standing, and we seem to be at the front line at the moment. Nobody. Where are these miners? What are we doing here?
I was running up. But this is when me and my friend helped me over the fence there. Got me round here. And then all the coppers started running over there. A couple of them got their truncheons out, you know. Come over here and says, "What you doing here?" Says, "I've got a sore leg." And they just looked at me. As you can see, it's still broken now, you know. They come over, they just stood in it. And they just walked away. One grabbed me up and says, "Tell me to get lost, you know." Two coppers come round, grabbed my arm and says, "You're our prisoner." That was it. But they take me down to the ambulance, then went to Rotherham Hospital where I got treated for a fractured leg.
He just said, "Get down, get down." And they were ordering all the pickets to go down this bank. And he lunged at me with his truncheon when I seemed somewhat reticent to go down it because it's bloody steep. Anyway, in the end I did. And I headed down here. As I was going, saw a policeman just maybe 15 feet along here throw a big log down onto the bottom of the line here. It's still there. And then I scrambled down this way and lost my footing about halfway down and skidded to the bottom, banged my foot badly on one foot and hurt my back. But then I just carried on and I crossed right across the railway lines.
I left school at 14 years of age, and jobs were hard to get then out of the pit because I had weak eyes and my dad didn't want me to go in the pit, but there was nothing else, only pit work round here. So I started down pit in 1925.
I was born in the village in 1897. I well remember as a child the beginning of each working day. At 5 o'clock in the morning, the colliery buzzer blasted forth for quite a time, reminding miners that it was time that they began to stir. One always felt a deep respect for the men who were willing to earn their living in the conditions underground which existed in those days. I've had various injuries during my working life of 51 years. Fingers broken and cartilages out at knees, slipped disc, fractured skull. I've had the lot. But, I've still gone back to pit. But if I'd have taken the letter, as the doctor gave me at Royal Infirmary at Sheffield, they wouldn't have set me on again at pit. I hadn't to do any stooping, no lifting, no noise, and I wouldn't take it. I just chucked it in fire and went back to my own job. It's better conditions now than ever they were under private enterprise. They've always wanted 12 men clamouring after one man's job. I never wrote above £30 home, and I used to live there. I used to be working till 8 o'clock at Sunday night and Saturdays as well, on move backs and maintenance work. And I tell you, I never brought above £30 home in all my working life. I've been retired now 10 years come Christmas. I worked till I was 65.
1947 and 48, you know, I work in 16 hours at Monday, 12 hours at Tuesdays, and 16 hours at Wednesday, 12 hours Thursday, and 16 hours at Friday, and 12 hours at Saturday, 12 hours Sunday. Got as much as 100 hours in a week, and sometimes going home with £14 when I finished. I mean, public thinks we're getting a lot, and we're not. We take about £73 home now. You know, I admit we get a bit of time, and you know, it goes up to £80 and things, you know.
The riot police was going at anybody, just moved up. They're now right up to the bridge. The miners have been thrown back completely, and Bridget and myself have stood behind the police lines now.
I have no doubts that I saw Scargill slip down the bank. I thought that he'd hit his head on the sleeper. He could not possibly have been hit by a shield-carrying officer on the bank, as they stayed on the road. They did not deviate from their route.
He was stood at the right-hand side of me. I glanced over, and the next thing I saw was one of these riot police with a riot shield hit him at the side of the arm and the face, and he just flattened him as if he were a tree. He just simply flattened him to the floor, and then I turned to look down there, and I was flattened also. I was just flattened, and then about 5 or 6 police come, and they were kicking, punching, hitting with truncheons, and that's how I ended up with multiple bruising.
At that moment, one of these police officers hit me at the back of the head with a short shield. Down I went onto the floor. I was covered in dust, I was cut on my arm, I was cut on my leg. The young lad helped me to my feet, called Peter. He dragged me, half carried me, up the bank into about this point here, in order to get me out of the battle zone. Ironically, Clements, the Assistant Chief Constable, at that point came over the bridge and concocted this amazing story, which was completely untrue, that I'd slipped down the bank at this point and hit my head. The only people who hit me on the head were the police in full riot gear who'd gone absolutely mad.
It was the most serious incident of public disorder that this country has seen this century. I do not know whether officers were out of control in the village, but I was afraid that the odd individual might hit somebody's head. Orgreave was unique, and I do not take responsibility for any injuries. They used the same discipline as in violence at football matches or a march. Orgreave was policed in a humane and compassionate manner.
There has been, since about 1981, groups of police officers in police support units training to incapacitate demonstrators. Their training has been derived from a manual which surfaced during this trial for the first time, a manual devised by senior police officers attached to ACPO, the Association of Chief Police Officers, who have a responsibility for certainly some of the events that occurred during the miners' strike and the mutual aid policy. There were serious acts of violence by senior and junior police officers in charge of those police support units, otherwise known as short shield units. Units that had never before been used before the 18th of June. Those units were out of control.
I've got a good bandage.
Somebody's phoned for an ambulance.
So what did that then? How's this happened?
Truncheon.
Fucking Gestapo.
Get out the bus, he's got a foot in. Truncheon.
Hey,
Truncheon.
minding my own business, that, mate. First day on picket line is this for this lad, and that's what he gets.
I don't think there's been a policeman charged yet. Nobody disciplined.
The government that are wanting our president to condemn violence, they never condemn the violence from the police. And they used the truncheons knocking the pickets to the ground that were just peaceful picketing. And anybody that saw that television, they was hitting behind the head and everything. The government's supposed to be a government of law and order, never condemned the police. This was a real mockery, I think.
So, I mean, I used to back police up at one time. Not now. That's it. So, no, it's finished me with police. So.
Wednesday, the 6th of April, 1921. The industrial crisis has become the main issue in the Taunton election. Sir Arthur Griffith Boscawen, speaking at Apsley Cross yesterday, said the coal strike was simply a revolutionary movement. The question before the electors was whether the Miners' Federation or the government should rule. The government was fighting a greater danger than the German military menace.
The one thing upset me about Mrs. Thatcher when she called us the enemy within. Yeah. Now, I'd got a boy fighting in Falklands. They were on a frigate in the Falklands, and I'd got a husband and a son working down Pate. And I don't want one being a hero and the other one being an enemy within, because it's wrong. I mean, he was awarded a mention in dispatches in Northern Ireland at 19. Of course, they were brave boys, but I think as much of my boys as brave working down Pate as that one is in forces. So why should she call them the enemy within? Yeah. Which is wrong.
I run around, I stood here. 2 or 3 of the pickets run around the back. 2 or 3 of the riot police chased them. One came past here on his own. As I stood against the wall, he just run past, lashed out his truncheon, hit us on the eye, split my eye, and the eye just started pouring with blood.
Well, I was walking down through here from Asda's. I had cream buns in my one hand, and I had a can of shandy in my other hand. I came to be here and I was hit across the back of the neck and I fell down. As I was getting up, there was police everywhere and boys running everywhere and men. As I was getting up, some boys hit me over and I went down on the floor by there. And while I was getting up from there, I went to pick my clean buns up and the policeman came and he cracked me across there, across the wrist with a truncheon. He said, "You can leave them bastards things there."
After being struck on the head, the next thing I remember is coming round, sitting on these steps here, with the 2 arresting officers and all the area around here full of police and other prisoners being brought in to comments from police officers such as bastards, you're not very hard now, you're away from your mates, things like that, the odd punch in face or a kick, things like that, and then taken into this building here behind me to have my photograph taken and to be interviewed and that.
I got to Rotherham Police Station and went into the cells, and I suppose I still feel sick and horrified at what I saw there. I was frightened because I saw people terribly injured, and I thought 2 of them in particular needed urgent medical attention and might not last. That was Mr. Critchlow and Mr. Newbegin. There was blood all over the place. There were people with dreadful wounds on their faces, their legs, their arms, and the back of their heads. There were so many people and so badly injured that they didn't look like people who've been arrested by the processes of the civilian law. It wasn't that situation. I'm used to seeing people who've been arrested and sometimes hurt by the police. I'm used to that. This wasn't like that at all. It was like the wounded survivors in a wartime. And the men themselves were, as well as being hurt, they needed doctors. They needed doctors rather than lawyers, and I wished I'd been a doctor rather than a lawyer. We got through the day, 12 hours in the police station, and then we had to go to court in the middle of the night for the first of the bail applications, and the whole process was so extraordinary, so out of the ordinary. They were treated like cattle, with contempt, remanded on extraordinary bail conditions with no regard for the evidence. The prosecution so cavalier, they didn't bother to produce evidence at court, didn't even take their papers to court on many occasions.
I was then remanded for 6 days and was then released by an High Court judge sitting in chambers, who released me on conditions that I report to Rotherham Police Station every morning before 11 o'clock. I was on a curfew from 7 o'clock at night till 9 o'clock in the morning. I wasn't to go on BSC property, National Coal Board property, Central Electricity Generating Board, British Rail, docks, and that was the conditions. So I was virtually under house arrest, apart from the 2 hours in the morning that it took me to travel to the police station to sign a book and then go back home.
What's happened over the last year has been the use of the courts and the criminal law for political purposes. Large numbers of miners, 11,000 were arrested last year, mass arrests on a scale never before seen, again for political reasons. The result of those arrests has been political trials, not in the sense that you might get them in South Africa, not that people have been arrested on a charge of holding a particular belief, or that they belong to a particular subversive organisation. But for some reason or another, these 11,000 have woken up one morning and supposedly committed criminal offences. There's no way, you may think, that such a law-abiding community suddenly wakes up one morning and does that. It has to be that large numbers of police officers, junior and senior, have been prepared to fabricate evidence against this community.
I think it's one thing to physically hurt somebody, and that way you terrorise them. But there is a far different process, which is the one the defendants saw when they went to court. And that's the real terror of putting somebody on trial in such a way and in such terms that they remain convinced, whatever the strength of their case, whatever the iniquities of the prosecution case, they remain convinced until they're acquitted that they're going to go to prison for the rest of their lives. And that was reinforced from the moment they were in court by the Home Secretary strutting around the country talking about riot carrying life imprisonment.
They took me into a room, 24 convicts, if you like, and you each had a number, and you sat on this chair with a number, and there was a chair at the other side. In between the two chairs was a partition, and I can remember them leading my wife in to see me, sobbing really heavy. All her nose were running. You know, I can picture it as though it were yesterday. Her nose were running that heavy, it were going into her mouth. And that first visit, I don't think we spoke. We just held hands up at partition like and just looked at each other. I think she were amazed as what I were to find ourselves in that position, you know. Stitches, I still got stitches in my head and locked in there. You know, must have been harder for her than for me. Must have been very worrying times for her.
It's no coincidence that during the strike, the Police and Criminal Evidence Bill, which gives the police greater powers of stop, of search, arrest, hours of custody, and also, interestingly, roadblocks, was going through the House of Commons, giving these extended and draconian powers to the police. It's no coincidence that while these trials are going on concerning minors, the Police Federation are calling for certain extra powers in dealing with what they call as picketing, and the Home Secretary has finally come out and indicated that the police are going to be given the power to decide how many people shall gather together, where they're going to gather together, and for how long.
Perhaps as the trial proceeds, those in the dock are beginning to get some sense of release and ultimate expectation that they're going to be exonerated. But that doesn't repay them for a year of keeping them underneath that grotesque power of the state. It will never repay them for that.
Being treated as a criminal, imprisoned and beaten by police for basically being on strike to save your job, it's wrong, and it's a bitter pill. It's a bitter pill to swallow. It's something we'll never forget as long as we live. You know, I haven't told my children yet that I've been in prison, and my wife didn't tell them then, when I were in, that I was in prison, for fear of upsetting them. But I'm sure when they're older and I tell them that I were in prison, I don't think that they'll walk with their heads down thinking their dad were a sort of convict, a thief or a rapist or whatever. I think they'll walk with their heads held high and their chests out and say, look, Arthur Critchlow's my dad, and I'm proud of him. It's terrible.
Looking back on the 18th of June, there is one thing I would change. I was a little wrong in being late in bringing out the protective shields. Having considered my answer, I do regret that.
And as we were stood here, police come charging up the road with the horses. So we walked over, and as there were quite a few of us stood around here, and I put my hands on top of the cars like that, just so I wasn't throwing stones. And as an horse come from the side around there, he forced us out, so as we ran out, I ended up falling over here. So I fell over, and I got back up like that. And as I walked over here. So there were a policeman coming up here towards me, so I put my hand on top of the car and tell him to withdraw his attack. But he wouldn't stop, so I just moved over here, and as I moved over here, he come forcing at me with his truncheon, with his shield, sorry. As he hit me, I fell into the car like that. And I was coming up, and he started hitting me with his truncheon. And I couldn't tell him to stop, and as I got off the car like that, pulled me by my leg, and he kept on dragging me over here. And all the time, I told him to put my foot down, but he wouldn't stop. And I stopped here. I told him to stand still, I put my hands behind my back, put handcuffs on me, just started making me walk. I'm here like that.
Some bastard!
At Orgreave, us miners, we experience firsthand the full power at state against industrial workers. And if people think it will only be used against miners or people on peace rallies, they better open their eyes up a little bit, because this government will use it against anyone to get their own means.
What Kinnock and people like that want you to believe is that all you have to do is wait and bide your time and vote in a Labour government at next election, and that everything will be right. What that presupposes is that the state is some kind of separate tool that each successive government can pick up and use in whatever way it wants to do. It's absolute rubbish. Getting a Labour government, it's still a capitalist state. The state will be used against it. And if it attempts to renationalise and to go on a programme of socialist policies, the capitalist state would arm itself against him and would stop him at every toss and turn. There's no way that voting in a Labour government is any answer. The answer has to be that working class will rise up, it'll smash capitalist state, and it'll take power. It has no choice but to do that.
By the time I'd got here, the major police charge had already taken place. There was all hell let loose. There were policemen, pickets, charging about all over the place. It was absolutely clear that there was no discipline or control by the police at all. I arrived on the pavement here and noticed that there was an injured man here. I climbed over the wall. He seemed to have rib injuries. He seemed to be in a lot of pain, and he was groaning. And I climbed over the wall, and I knelt down by his head here. I recall having to hold my camera back so it didn't hit him on the head. It seemed to me that he may have broken ribs and needed an ambulance. So I stood up. There was a police officer standing in the road. I called to him, "Can you please get an ambulance? There's an injured man here." And at that moment, I noticed something happening here. I turned round, and this police officer was about to hit me across the head with a truncheon. I ducked, and somebody pulled me from behind at the same time, and I went down like that. And he just missed me, and I felt the truncheon go down past my side like that. I felt the wind of it go past me. It was very quick and very frightening.
Me, for one, I'd be damned if I'd sit back and let it happen, and I know a lot of people in the same frame of mind as me as well.
To Mrs Thatcher, Leon Britton and the rest of them, police forces, we'll get organised the next time.
I would fight for my job, I would fight for my union, and I would fight for any union.
We're there to fight for us as livelihood and as communities, and if that's what it takes, then we shall fight again.
I stood by my principles for a year.
We've been slightly beaten up, but we'll never be beat, but we will be back. That's the message I like to get at.
We've got to, somewhere, us lads who did stick it out, we've got to get together and we've got to fight it. We've got to fight this system.
Get regroup, get everybody out, general strike. That's the only way we're going to win.
It's not ended by a long way. No. It's still going on. We went through a year's strike, but we'd go through it again. I think they want to keep you down and hold you down. And we're rebelling against that.
Thatcher's done this to us. We've seen the light.
Stand on your own feet.
Yeah. Well, she's made us as she is.
Yeah, we are as hard as her now. More determined to fight.
It's a man's basic right to work and to keep his family, and I would still do the same again if called upon to do so, now, tomorrow, a year, 10 years' time, any time. I would still bite my union to the hilt in the defence of jobs.
The coal industry is basically at the same crossroads as it was in March 1984. The miners have got a simple choice to make. They can either acquiesce, lie down in front of the bulldozer of the National Coal Board and government policy of closing pits and butchering the industry and communities, or they can fight back. The miners, if they'll take my advice, will, however unfortunate and unpalatable, have to take strike action again to save their industry, their jobs and their communities. I happen to believe it's worth fighting for. The only other message I would have is for the rest of the labour and trade union movement. This time, don't stand on the sidelines. This time, you've got to join in.